The unfortunate thing about indie comics is that the two big guys, Marvel and DC, have done a lot of stuff already. So a lot of characters will be spins on originals, but honestly, sometimes they are way cooler. Pitt is basically inspired by the Incredible Hulk, but I don't want that to undermine how cool he is. The giant ball of hulking muscle and rage is a combination of human DNA mixed with genetic material from a race known as the Creed. Pitt escaped from the laboratory where he was being studied, but was captured and trained to be an assassin, so that sets him apart already. While on a mission though, a child's consciousness was melded with Pitt's, and after this merger, he fled to Earth and found a young boy who is technically his genetic relative. Pitt is as crazy strong as he seems to look, and I don't know if you saw the super scary claws, but he has super scary claws, so that's kind of freaky. He also has a degree of telepathy and uses it to make himself an incredible tracker, establishing a mental link with whoever he's tracking, making him able to track them from the other side of the world. He also has emotional control, meaning he can unbalance other people's emotions in order to make them commit errors while fighting. And I don't know why I've never heard of another character doing that before. That's actually really cool. Whereas the Hulk gets stronger the madder he gets, Pitt uses pain as a stimulant, making him even more of an aggressive fighter and a de-lifer. Number 9. Mighty Man. Different from most of the heroes on this list, Mighty Man is less of a person and more of a power that is passed on from person to person. Mighty Man is a tall, handsome, and ruggedly built blonde man, even when that is definitely not what his host is. So for example, the current Mighty Man is actually a woman named Anne Samantha Stevens, who becomes Mighty Man whenever she taps her wrists together. The power was passed on to her from the previous host Robert Bergman, who fought in World War II. When she's not a superhero, she's actually helping out other superheroes, such as being the nurse that helped the Savage Dragon recover when he was first found with no memory out in that burning field. The Mighty Man powers include flight, invulnerability, leadership, magic, stamina, super speed, and super strength. And it's honestly really easy to draw parallels between him and Shazam, and even the original Thor, who used to transform from Donald Blake. Number 8. Savage Dragon. The Savage Dragon is one of Image Comics' most popular and long-lasting characters, and he has been around since his debut as just Dragon in Graphic Fantasy #1 in June of 1982. Basically, the Savage Dragon woke up butt naked and with no memory in a burning field. He was a giant green man with a big old fin on top of his head and super ripped like most heroes are. Now, what he didn't know at the time was that he was actually an alien conqueror named Kerr, who originally came to Earth to conquer it, but was betrayed by two scientists. He was an enhanced member of the alien race called the Krillin, or Krylin, and his enhanced Krylin/Krillin physiology gave him superhuman strength, agility, and stamina, healing abilities, and telepathic resistance. Now, one of my favorite parts about this hero is that instead of joining a superhero team and being a typical hero, the Dragon actually wound up being a member of the Chicago Police Department and helping with their super freak problem. I think it's kinda cool to ground a character like that, but the nature of his powers still leave him near the top of the list. Number 7. Velocity. Velocity, as her name kind of implies, has the ability of super speed. Although a pretty basic power, it is nonetheless incredibly useful. Imagine receiving a punch from someone who's moving near Mach 13. You're done. You ain't coming back. They punch you in the jaw? Sorry, you no longer have a jaw anymore. That's just how it goes. Velocity has been clocked at running at speeds of Mach 13, and she is actually holding back because she's afraid if she runs any faster, she could destroy the Earth. And she likely could. Without something like DC's Speed Force to bend the laws of physics, moving at such extreme speeds at ground level could do terrible things to the Earth's atmosphere, as well as possibly incinerating anything on or near her path. Just think about that for like a little bit. Cyberdata, the group that gave Karen Taylor the cybernetic enhancements that turned her into Velocity and let her move at her crazy speed, also implanted Kevlar under her skin to prevent extreme damage from running at those speeds. I don't know, I feel like you gotta do a little bit more than that, but hey, I just work here. She also has a cybernetic device called the Brain Box that lets her process information at hyper speeds, which is something that at least won't destroy the planet. Number 6. Mr. Majestic. Jim Lee, who created this character, said he wanted to explore a character who had Superman's powers but was not afraid to use them, which resulted in the character of Lord Magistros, aka Mr. Majestic. He was an alien from the planet of Kara and was their High Lord, and a warlord who felt that he could be judge and jury. So Mr. Majestic has all the powers the Man of Steel has, like super speed, strength, invulnerability, energy projection from his eyes, and all that good super stuff. Plus telekinesis and telepathy. Except he is essentially extremely brutal and militant. He is not afraid to use his power in the slightest, but it's still aligned to the side of good, for the most part, which does step him apart from other characters like him. He would eventually become the leader of the Wildcats for a time, and when on Earth, he would imprison criminals without a trial, and while he eased up somewhat on his ways, he never truly reverted or became completely good. There's actually an instance where he winds up in Metropolis, and him and Superman talk about their different methods, which is actually pretty cool.
Up next, number 5, Witchblade. Witchblade, the series published by Top Cow Productions, follows a character named Sarah Panezzi, an NYPD homicide detective who comes across a gauntlet artifact. That artifact is Witchblade, a supernatural sentient piece of armor that bonds with a female host, providing her a ton of magical superpowers in order to fight off evil. Now, the woman who wields Witchblade gets this laundry list of cool abilities. She can shapeshift, has superhuman strength and endurance, a healing factor which extends to fatal wounds, invulnerability, pyrokinesis, tactile healing, the healing of illnesses and wounds of other creatures, summoning for weapons and whatnot, and an adaptive armor which covers its host entirely depending on the situation. The armor is incredibly strong and impervious to firearms, explosives, and even energy blasts. But take that gauntlet off and oof, no bueno. Moving on to number 4, Lucifer. The Wicked and the Divine is a really awesome series. It's a contemporary fantasy comic book published by Image Comics, highly influenced by pop music, and follows various mythological deities. So of course Lucifer the fallen angel is in it. Lucifer is the devil and one of the gods of the pantheon in the Divine and the Wicked. She's pretty impressive in terms of her abilities. She's a pyrokinetic, able to produce fires as she pleases, and the ability to cause foes to combust. She can also use the ability to cause foes to combust, create entire walls of fire, or use it with such precision as to destroy bullets. She can also use this fire as a force field to protect herself, and she has the ability to grant powers to an extent, and can teleport to the underground. Speaking of the Divine and the Wicked, that brings us to our next number in at 3, Laura Wilson. The narrative of the Divine and the Wicked follows our number here, Laura, who interacts with the Pantheon, a group of 12 people who are reincarnated deities. They end up getting supernatural powers, but there is a stipulation. They will die within 2 years as part of a 90-year cycle called the Recurrence. Laura briefly becomes the reincarnation of Persephone, the goddess of springtime, vegetation, flowers, fertility, nature, death, rebirth, and of course, the queen of the underworld. Moving on to number 2, Frau Totenkinder. Frau Totenkinder is from Fables, and she's known as the Black Forest Witch. She's a powerful member of the 13th floor in Fabletown, the group of witches and sorcerers who provide enhancements and spells that keep the community safe and cloak the magical nature of its inhabitants from the outside world. Often her spells come at a steep price. She's been around since the Paleolithic era. Her natural form is a beautiful young woman, but she normally appears as old. Also, she passed away. She's the former leader of the 13th floor. So when she was alive and kicking, what could she do, magically speaking? Well, for starters, she was immortal. She used to sacrifice 2 children a year so she wouldn't age. That is intense. She was capable of precognition, witchcraft that allowed her to self-resurrect, create her own spells including the death curse, curse others, of course, magical energy blast, elemental manipulation, mind control, shapeshift, transmutation, portal creation, magical tool creation, and also had an extreme knowledge of all things occult. Yeah, not too shabby. And finally, in at number 1, Ananke. Ananke is the personification of inevitability, compulsion, and necessity in the Divine and the Wicked. Ananke has immense powers and is considered one of the most powerful gods in the series. She is the one who acts as an advisor to the Pantheon, informs them that they are gods, and begins their incarnation. While she cares a great deal for the others, she always prioritizes the recurrence over the lives of the individuals. So, what can she do? She is capable of divine incarnation and bestowing powers, being the one who is in charge of each individual's ascension into godhood. She grants them the divine powers. She can manipulate and project energy. She likes to explode heads, and has a great deal of control over said power. She can atomize humans if she chose to do so. She can project force fields and siphon energy, and she's got an immense tolerance to pain. She's immortal, duh, and can split her consciousness into 2 entirely different bodies.
Number 10. Ghost. Ghost, also known as Eliza Dearlane, is a character that comes from Dark Horse Comics. Her first appearance was all the way back in 1993. Eliza was a journalist who ended up being killed while she was investigating the city of Arcadia. When she returns from the dead, she is determined to investigate and go after those responsible for her death. Of course, now she has some cool new abilities to help her with that, which include Ghost Jump, which allows her to travel, long distances, flight, healing, and immortality. Number 9. Savage Dragon. Savage Dragon comes from Image Comics and has been around since 1982. He is a massive green-skinned alien superhero. Turns out, he was actually an emperor of this alien race. This race of aliens, they were trying to find a safe new planet to call home. Originally, he was thinking about wiping out all of humans and taking over Earth. But 2 of his officers didn't want that to happen, so they wiped his memories and replaced them with days worth of events that was happening, on Earth. They sent him down to Earth where he had no idea who he was or even what he was. He then became a hero and his race of aliens went off to search for a new home without him. Savage Dragon is very strong, he's invulnerable, has accelerated healing, and is a master of hand-to-hand combat. Number 8. Bloodshot. This one seems rather fitting considering his live action feature film is in theaters now, and it stars Vin Diesel. Okay, so Bloodshot comes from the Valiant universe, and he is an enhanced super soldier. He became a test subject for a secret government organization where memories of his past were erased, and he was injected with microscopic computers called nanites. Because of this, he has enhanced strength, agility, and the ability to heal from any injury, making him an unstoppable killing machine. Now, I haven't seen the movie yet, but Valiant really wants it to work so they can kick off their own cinematic universe, featuring a variety of characters from, their comic universe. And everyone wants a cinematic universe nowadays. Number 7. Damien Hellstrom. Damien Hellstrom is potentially going to be a lot more well known soon since he has a series coming out on Hulu. I say potentially because with a lot of the Marvel television division shutting down, it's very likely that his series might not happen. Similar to what happened to the Ghost Rider Hulu series. Okay, so Damien is the son of Victoria Hellstrom and the demon Lord Satan. The Hellstrom family has worshipped the devil for a long time, and then Victoria decided to have a child with Satan. She also ran a cult called the Chapel of Dresden. Now, Damien wasn't aware of his parentage for a long time, but he did find out eventually, so he began to harness his abilities and became very, very powerful. After years of training, he took on the hero name of Hellstorm. He became the ruler of Hell, but still fights for good, but it's gone back and forth between good and evil sometimes, as they usually do. But he's mostly good. He has strength, spellcasting, durability, and can cast Hellfire from his trusty old trident. Number 6. Swamp Thing. I feel like Swamp Thing was about to become a fairly well-known superhero, but unfortunately that didn't really happen because the show got cancelled. And not because it was bad, it was a weird behind-the-scenes money issue, and it got amazing reviews. So it's really sad. But maybe one day he will truly have his time to shine. Swamp Thing, also known as Alec Holland, was a scientist who, along with his wife, Linda, also a scientist, were working on a formula that would help solve the world's food shortage problem. Unfortunately, thugs broke into his lab and set up a bomb to sabotage the formula. Alec was knocked out, but woke up right as the bomb went off. He then caught on fire and was covered in his own, bioformula, and he ran out into the swamp. But in doing so, it ended up not only affecting him, but the plant life in the swamp. He now has abilities that include being able to communicate and control all forms of plant life, enhance strength, immortality, and can change his size and create copies of himself that only he can control.
Number 5. Supreme. Supreme is a character inspired by DC's Superman. He was originally created by Rob Liefeld, but has seen some changes as he's developed over the years. The character was originally a part of Image Comics' roster of supers, but he has moved around with Liefeld after he left Image and founded other indie publishing houses. The great thing about Supreme was that despite being a Superman-esque figure, his series was always somewhat more self-aware, poking fun at some of the typical historical superhero tropes. When Alan Moore started writing for the character and comic of Supreme, starting on issue number 41 of the series, he actually earned himself an Eisner for his reworking of the character. And his issues also included a lot of cool nods to comic book history as well. Number 4. Witchblade. The series Witchblade centers around a mystical artifact and the woman who is granted it after it abandons its current host, in order to save her and to heal her. This object is known as the Witchblade itself, and this woman is Sarah Pezzini, an NYPD homicide detective. The powers granted to her by the Gauntlet are the abilities to form weapons and armor using it, usually very provocative armor. The Witchblade also grants Sarah enhanced strength, flight, allows her to shoot energy blasts, and grants her a healing factor. Witchblade was created by Mark Silvestri, David Wohl, Brian Haberlin, and Michael Turner. Number 3. Vampirella. Vampy, as she is fondly known by her fans, has moved from publishing house to publishing house during her time in the comic book world. But she's also no spring chicken when it comes to her history as a hero. She actually first appeared in Vampirella issue number 1 in 1969 from Warren Publishing. Makes her, what, over 50 years old? Makes her over 50 years old, oh my goodness. Although now the character property belongs to Dynamite, who has created multiple Vampirella volumes since having her join their roster of heroes in 2010. Vampirella has more than one origin story, but the mainstays seem to be that she is an alien from the planet Draculon, where the rivers once ran red, and vampire-like aliens like Vampy once thrived, or that she is the daughter of Lilith. Or sometimes kind of both. Number 2. Bloodshot. Finally being given his own feature film, which was just recently released in theaters with Vin Diesel starring as Bloodshot, who is in this iteration going by the name Ray Garrison. Bloodshot comes to us from Valiant Comics and is known as an anti-hero who is used by the corporation PRS, Project Rising Spirit, as a weapon. He either signed up or was forcibly used in an experimental process which put nanites in his blood, granting him a powerful regenerative healing factor as well as superhuman strength and speed. Unfortunately, his mind and his memories were also tampered with to help PRS effectively manipulate him and use him as a weapon. So it is still unknown if Ray Garrison truly is his name or another one of the many false identities implanted within his mind by PRS. Bloodshot was created by Kevin Van Hook, Don Perlin, and Bob Layton. Number 1. Hellboy. Hellboy was created by Mike Mignola and is from the series Hellboy out of Dark Horse Comics. He was just a little half-demon baby when he was summoned to Earth from Hell by Nazi occultists. Unable to bring himself to kill the young demon and believing he could probably be redeemed, Professor Brutenhold, head of BPRD, Bureau for Paranormal Research and Defense, took him in and raised Hellboy as his own son. Hellboy's spectacular stories involve monsters from all kinds of lore and cultures and are a fun mashup of horror, comedy, and action, while also having a sort of period feel to them as well. There's sometimes a very film noir feel in these stories. Number 10. Oliver. Oliver is from his own self-titled series of the same name. This series comes to us from Image Comics. He was created by writer Gary Whitta and artist Derek Robertson. In a post-apocalyptic world, young Oliver fights to liberate an England that is left in ruins following a nuclear-fueled world war. While this is all happening, Oliver also seeks to learn more about himself and uncover the mysteries tied to his own origins. This very different take on the Charles Dickens classic is a great series as well for anyone to check out that loves apocalyptic hero stories and a good mystery. Plus, is gorgeous. Number 9. Red Sonja. Red Sonja is a character whose property has belonged to a few different publishers over the years, but most recently she has found her home within Dynamite Comics. Sonja is a character who has always been well known for being a badass barbarian with flowing red locks who often takes to the field of battle clad in her famous chainmail bikini. While different runs have aligned her fighting style with a particular weapon, she is generally presented as someone who is skilled with pretty much almost any weapon that she comes across, and as someone who is quick to use whatever is at her disposal to fight with. She's beaten many foes with axe, sword, bow, and dagger as well as with her bare hands. Sometimes she charges her enemies and other times she stalks them in the shadows, but one thing is for sure, she is not a foe you want to cross. Her latest volume with Dynamite started in 2019 and is still ongoing. The Red She-Devil was originally created by Roy Thomas and Barry Windsor Smith for Marvel Comics. Number 8. Persephone/Laura Wilson. Laura Wilson is revealed as the reincarnation of Persephone in the comic series The Wicked and the Divine. She also happens to be the main character of the comic series and the narrator. The Wicked and the Divine is created by Karen Gillan and Jamie McKelvey. Laura herself is someone who idolizes and wants to be a part of the Gods group, who are all kind of like modern day rock stars in this incarnation. Through befriending Lucifer, aka Lucy, she gets closer to the group and later discovers that she is likely the goddess Persephone reincarnated herself. Her main power as Persephone allows her to summon vines and control them, which she can do like her fellow gods with a click of her fingers. And like the other gods, she also has performance abilities. Number 7. Deathblow. Deathblow was first introduced in the comic Darker Image in issue number 1. He was created by Jim Lee and Brandon Choi and comes to us from Wildstorm. While Wildstorm is now an imprint of DC, when it was originally founded by Jim Lee, who is now the sole publisher at DC Comics, it was an an independent publishing company. While many people think of Midnighter as Wildstorm's top dog right now, Deathblow's introduction to the comics actually predates Midnighter being introduced in 1993 himself. And while he is a Wildstorm character, he was actually introduced in an Image comic series. That's right, Darker Image was from Image Comics. Michael Cray was a member of the US Navy who later transferred to a special ops unit called Team 7. During his time with the team, they were exposed to the Gen Factor. Surviving, Cray didn't initially seem to manifest powers like the other team survivors, but years later his powers would surface. Deathblow is a member of Stormwatch and has a regenerative healing factor and telekinetic powers, along with his years of combat experience. Number 6. The Darkness. What happens when you combine Witchblade and gargoyles? At least the feel of gargoyles. Such a good feels. Well, you get the Darkness. The Darkness first appeared in Witchblade issue 10 and was created by David Wall, Mark Silvestri, and Garth Ennis. The Darkness is an evil cosmic entity that embodies the absence of light, in other words, the dark void of chaos. Witchblade is also descended from the Darkness, but so is the power granted to Jackie Estacado, who is known as the Darkness in the comics. The power granted to him was passed on to him from his father, which became entwined with humans when the Darkness, after Witchblade's creation, started to possess humans. It was then passed on from father to son, with powers such as the ability to control demonic creatures, summon shadow armor and weapons, and the power to heal injuries, manifesting in its current host on their 21st birthday, with that current host being Jackie.
Number 5. Witchblade. Sarah Pazzini was a police detective who came in contact with an ancient magical artifact called the Witchblade. Sarah, before Witchblade, she was just a normal human, but while harnessing the power of Witchblade, it opens up a wide array of abilities such as shape-shifting, weapons or armor, super strength, invulnerability, pyrokinesis, and healing. She is also a very skilled fighter thanks to her many years of training as a police officer, so that along with her abilities make her a very powerful and formidable foe. Number 4. Jackie Estacado. Jackie Estacado is an anti-hero who harnesses the power of the Darkness. He is a hitman who ended up using this power to make a name for himself. He is by no means innocent, but he does go after primarily bad people. You know, I did say he was an anti-hero, so. While harnessing the power of the Darkness, Jackie can create anything he desires. What that means is that he can create solid objects like armor or weapons. He can also create demon-like creatures. He has enhanced strength and a certain level of invulnerability. The catch is, the Darkness can only function when there is no light. So if it comes in contact with any source of light, it's powerless. Number 3. The Phantom Stranger. The Phantom Stranger comes from the DC universe and is a very, very mysterious being, so mysterious that his true origins have never been technically revealed. He has had multiple origins over the course of the years. It's crazy, right? Let's go over some of them. One of his origins is that he is a fallen angel who decided to stay neutral during Lucifer's rebellion against heaven. Another was that he was a citizen during biblical times. During that time, he committed suicide, but the angels didn't allow it, and instead stopped him from entering the afterlife and forced him to walk the earth for eternity, which is where he found his calling, to turn away humanity from evil. Another theory is that he is a remnant of a dead universe. And another is that he was a man named Isaac who had a wife and a daughter around the time when, Jesus would have been a child. And when the king sent out soldiers to kill all the young males in an attempt to kill Jesus, fortunately, some of those casualties were his wife and son. He then blamed Jesus for this, so he tried to take revenge on him, and because of that, Jesus sent him to walk the earth until doomsday. So, whatever his origin is, the Phantom Stranger is very powerful. His powers include immortality, spellcasting, illusion casting, reality manipulation, and teleportation. Number 2. Spawn. Oh, Spawn. Oh, Spawn. He's such a cool character. Here's hoping that the new reboot that is in production really works out for him. Although, it's having some behind the scenes issues. Jamie Foxx was originally supposed to play him, but it sounds like that may have fallen through. So, we'll see what happens. Spawn's real name is Al Simmons. Al was a highly trained mercenary, and one day he was on a mission and he got murdered by his friend Bruce Stinson. Al was sent to hell, and in order to see his wife Wanda again one last time, he makes a deal. He returns to Earth as a Hell Spawn. He's now forced to do the bidding of a demon from hell. He takes on very dangerous people and creatures. He has strength, durability, and this amazing symbiotic suit which not only protects him but makes him look so friggin' cool. Number 1. Hellboy. Hellboy, who is becoming now more well known thanks to a few big screen appearances, was a demonic baby found in 1944 by US soldiers. He was summoned from hell to bring about the apocalypse, but fortunately the group that found him wasn't into that sort of thing. As Hellboy got older, he went on to work for the BPRD, the Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense, an organization whose purpose is to study and protect the world from any type of supernatural threat. And Hellboy is a vital member of that team. Hellboy is of course very enhanced, which helps out a lot when the company is dealing with an array of scary and weird powerful beings. Trust me, you don't want to get on his bad side. He has enhanced strength, accelerated healing, ages very slowly, and has his right hand of doom. He also never leaves home without his trusty handgun, the Good Samaritan.
And at number 10, Punk Mambo. From the Valiant universe, Punk Mambo is a series about a hard-living voodoo priestess, raised in London, relocated to the Bayou. A mystical mercenary for hire, often helping the wayward, troubled, and damned with what afflicts them, she does it for a price, often a steep one. Mambo, whose real name is Victoria Greaves Trott, is described as a street-savvy British punk with a rich cultural history of voodoo, and she battles the forces of evil too. So, what is this priestess capable of? Astral projection, hypnosis, illusion casting, magic, duh, necromancy, longevity, she doesn't age, and unarmed combat. She also has enhanced senses. Neat. Next up, in at number 9, Blue Boy. Blue Boy is a character from Fables, a series published by Vertigo, which, yes, is owned by DC, but cut us some slack here, friends. The series features characters from fairy tales and folklore who call themselves Fables, and live in a centuries-old community within New York City after their homelands were conquered by a deadly and mysterious enemy known as the Adversary. Blue is known as a hero, and he was a former farmhand and warrior before becoming a clerk at the business office in Fabletown. And he's magical! He's immortal, as all Fables are, and carries around something called a Vorpal Blade, which can cut through most spells and enchantments. He also has a witching cloak which acts as an impregnable armor that cannot be burned, stretched, or ripped. It also has an endless personal carrying capacity and can give the wearer shapeshifting abilities. I mean, crap, hook me up with one of those please. Where do I buy on Amazon? In at number 8, Marco, from Saga. While Saga hardly feels like an indie comic these days, and is published by Image Comics, it's definitely by far one of the best and most popular series outside of DC and Marvel series. Saga is the story of a fugitive family struggling to survive a galactic war between the Wreath and the Landfall. Alana and Marco, our somewhat protagonist parents, were born on opposite sides of the war, becoming star-crossed lovers who have a child, Hazel, who narrates the series. It's a sci-fi meets fantasy, and it's got its fair share of magic. Marco was born on Wreath and has magical abilities that are quite unique. He has disintegration abilities in which he uses the ingredients of secrets to disintegrate hostile plant life. He can use binding spells to trap enemies together. He has healing abilities, but for healing big wounds he requires snow as an ingredient in the spell. Now that last one is something that he can only do to others born on Wreath if he needs to heal them. And he's also capable of electrokinesis, in which he can summon lightning strikes. Up next, number 7, Dee from Rat Queens. Dee, which is short for Delilah, is a human cleric, an atheist, and a character who hails from a family of Lovecraftian monster cultists who praised a flying squid god called Nyrioth. Nyrioth? I'm probably saying that wrong. It's a squid god, so cut me some slack. She used to be the high priestess of said cult, but having become disillusioned by the horrible things her family worshipped, she left and began to travel on her own, which is how she met the other rat queens in the series. These days she mostly uses her magic for healing, but is also capable of necromancy, and she is skilled with a dagger. In at number 6, Snow White. Snow White is the deputy mayor of Fabletown, and is one of the main characters we follow throughout the series of Fables. She was the first wife of Prince Charming before falling for Big B Wolf and getting married to him. So, what is Snow capable of? A lot, actually. She's pretty bad. For starters, she's immortal like all Fables, but her magical abilities are where it's at. She is a descendant of a particularly magical line, inheriting great natural power, and she reeks of elegant energies, according to Prince Brandish. She can conjure armor and weapons, and she can fly, which is pretty darn cool. She also has superhuman durability, which allows her to be virtually invulnerable. She's been shot in the head and has survived from it. In addition to that, she also speaks German, can manage the hell out of the business, and is an expert at fencing and knows her way around hand-to-hand combat.
Number 5, Invincible. Now, I was going to choose Omni-Man for this top spot, but given how many Superman but brutal characters there are out there and how boring that is now, I wanted to talk about Mark Grayson himself. Mark is a member of the race known as the Viltrumites, which are a group of extremely powerful aliens who, due to their diminished numbers, go solo out into the universe to conquer planets for their empire. Mark's dad, Omni-Man, is the most powerful superhero on Earth, until one day he reveals his true Viltrumite mission and does battle with his son, who convinces him to the error of his ways. Now, Viltrumites are basically immortal. They age at an extremely slow rate, which slows down even further as they mature, eventually stopping altogether. They also get stronger and stronger with age, and every time they are defeated or gravely hurt in combat, they will heal, very quickly I might add, to be even more stronger than they were before. Viltrumites can also fly and survive the vacuum of space. Mark, his dad, and another Viltrumite flew through the core of a planet, completely destroying it, and Mark himself has defeated people much more powerful than him with sheer willpower and determination. He eventually becomes a galactic peacekeeper, bringing the whole universe to a state of complete peace and prosperity. He's actually a really great dude. Number 4. Void. Void's real name was Adriana Tereshkova, a Russian cosmonaut who, while on a space mission, had her craft destroyed by this crazy silver space orb that bonded with her. The orb was part of an entity named Omnia, who had passed on but had formed herself into several of these different colored energy orbs that found their way to various hosts. Void was basically, well, a void. During a battle, her face is actually literally knocked off of her body, revealing that there's nothing but energy inside of her metal shell body. One of her more useful powers was teleportation, being able to transport her teammates anywhere on Earth. She also has clairvoyance, precognition, being able to see the future, astral projection, chronokinesis, telekinesis, and energy manipulation. The greatest of those abilities was being able to see fragments of what the future held, a very useful ability that helped her and her team, the Wildcats, out on multiple occasions. Void at one point met the Valiant Comics character Solar, and when the two became lovers, their universes merged in a crossover event called Deathmate. So she can also merge universes together, which is, I mean, I'd say that's a pretty powerful ability. Number 3. Angelus. Angelus is an immortal being who's been worshipped by people as early as the Incan Empire back in the 15th century. Her counterpart, or opposite, is the Darkness, an evil entity that has existed since the beginning of time. Now, both entities require human vessels, but the Darkness follows the bloodlines of violent people such as criminals, whereas Angelus can choose whoever she wants. Angelus has the powers of light on her side and imbues in her human host strength, speed, stamina, flight, resistance to injury from earthly weapons, and the ability to create objects of pure light. On top of that, any host of Angelus can recall the memories of previous hosts, which is an extremely useful ability if you really think about it. Angelus does have a bit of a weakness though. To maintain a presence in the body she's occupying, the host body must be in light. Being in complete darkness can drain Angelus and cause death to the host, but Angelus would be fine, so I mean, not the worst of weaknesses, really. Number 2. Supreme. Another Superman-like character. Yay! Don't hate me, please. Supreme is known as a prime hero in his universe, meaning he is basically Superman, but more of an homage to the character. The origin of how Ethan Crane gained his powers is a little confusing. There have been 2 main writers, with the second one, Alan Moore, making him a heroic character, having him exposed to supremium radiation, turning his hair white and giving him flight, incredible strength, near invulnerability, super senses, the ability to project heat beams from his eyes, and speed supreme when he was 5 years old. He fought in World War II, then decided to go off-world and experience almost half a century of space adventures. When he returned to Earth, he was confronted by the Youngblood team, who didn't believe he was who he said he was. He's able to defeat their strongest character, Die Hard, within seconds, and that kinda changes their minds. But now, Supreme has to deal with a very different time period. So in a way, he's almost like Captain America 2, which is kind of a cool combo to have. And number 1, it's Spawn. Todd McFarlane created the character Spawn in May 1992, and this character popped off, selling an epic 1.7 million copies, and he is definitely one of the characters that put Image Comics on the map, and that's an impressive superpower indeed. Spawn tells the story of Al Simmons, a Marine who died in the line of duty and makes a deal with the devil, or more specifically, Malbolgia, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, to come back to life to once again be with his wife, Wanda. Simmons returned to the land of the living, but was bonded to an organic supersuit that had an extremely long list of powers of its own. Some of his powers include flight, invisibility, phasing, healing factor, shapeshifting, necromancy, superhuman endurance, reflexes, agility, senses and stamina, telekinesis, telepathy, memory manipulation, time manipulation, transmutation, cosmic awareness, chlorokinesis, geokinesis, weather manipulation, hydrokinesis, and immortality as long as his head is intact. Oh, he also has this thing called the Black Dispersal, which allows Spawn to call upon creatures of darkness and sin who will attack beings of light, but who Spawn can also control. These creatures include wolves, bears, worms, and bats, which is kind of rude to all those animals. Spawn also has necroplasmic energy manipulation, which basically equates to vast magical powers, which used to have a limit of 9,999 uses, but were only limited by his imagination. He's been able to conjure up a car key, materialize a box of fine wine for his friends, and even resurrect the dead at the cost of his necrometer. Spawn initially starts out in the shadows fighting street criminals, but eventually takes the fight back to male Bulgia, kills him, and becomes the king of hell. What comes after 1? Yes, nothing.
Number 10. Draculina. To be clear, when we talk about heroes you've never heard of, we're more talking about those that sit on the outskirts of the superhero fandoms, so you won't find them likely on the big screen or on DC's or Marvel's main teams like the Justice League, Avengers, or the X-Men. Instead, these are heroes who come from a more humble background by comparison. Some of them may have been simply forgotten due to just how long they've been around, whereas others typically are associated with smaller or even in some cases now defunct publishers. Coming from the world of fellow indie hero Vampirella, Draculina is sort of Ella's adopted sister and also kind of her ex-lover or ex-one-night stand. There have actually been at least 2 different Draculinas, possibly 3 at this point. One is Lilith's biological daughter and the biological twin sister of Vampy, who is blonde. The other one, the one I'm focusing on, who was once Vampy's lover, became obsessed with her and was eventually adopted by Lilith to become the new Draculina. If you want to learn more about her and other Vampy adjacent characters, Sacred 6 is a pretty cool comic that I would recommend that you check out. Or you can learn more about this version of Draculina in the 2019 Vampirella series from Dynamite. Both of those series, by the way, are by Christopher Priest. Both Draculinas go by the name Victory, although the one we're talking about here was originally named Victoria, but the two do differ in terms of appearance and, like I said, blood relation. Blood relation in this context almost becomes a vampire pun. This new Draculina isn't exactly a vampire, by the way, but is armed with a demonic ring that basically grants her powers similar to one, allowing her to accurately play the part. Draculina is currently a property of Dynamite Comics. Number 9. Tony Chu. Tony Chu is a quirky and unique character, but still is ultimately a hero, and even technically has superpowers, so he would qualify as a superhero. Tony is a detective who possesses the unique power of sebopathy. Whatever he eats, except for beets, he gains in-depth knowledge of, being able to tell where all the ingredients that make it up came from, being able to taste everything about that ingested food. Tony uses this skill to basically solve murders mainly, sometimes even ingesting parts of victims or the accused, sometimes even ingesting parts of the victims or the suspects to learn more about the case and help solve it. He initially worked for the Philadelphia Police Department, but ultimately gets fired after they witness him eating part of a deceased suspect. He later is hired by the FDA. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, there are actually a lot more indie superheroes that I would love to tell you about as we dive into the world of unknown supers. So if you want to learn more, be sure to let us know by commenting below and giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Red Sonja. One of my favorite lesser known heroes is Red Sonja. Red Sonja comes to us from the less sci-fi, more fantasy-based world of sword and sorcery. She is an extremely gifted fighter, marksman, and sword bearer. Red Sonja, the she-devil, is said to have been given her name for, well, many different reasons. One such story as to how she got her name is that she left to seek out adventure and her fortune and became a mercenary, earning the name Red because of all the blood that she spilled. Red Sonja, while not a traditional hero, pretty much always stands up to those who are cruel and corrupt, often fighting for those who are oppressed, even against her better judgment. She has even fought death before in combat and won, allowing her to live on when she was on the brink of death. Red Sonja was once a character from the Marvel Comics wheelhouse, but currently calls Dynamite Comics her home. Number 7. Josephine. More commonly referred to as Jo, Josephine is the main character and hero of the Fatale series. More commonly referred to as Jo, Josephine is the main character and hero of the Fatale series, which comes to us from Image Comics. Fatale is a supernatural noir-style comic created by the brilliant team-up of writer Ed Brubaker and artist Sean Phillips. Seriously, I love these two together. Some might argue that Jo isn't really a hero as she's, well, she's a little bit selfish, but in focusing on uncovering the mysteries of her own power and in trying to save herself, she does inevitably save others. In the long run, at least. There are a lot of people that end up being sacrificed along the way in order for Jo to stand a chance in defeating her enemies in the end. And also there are just straight up people being sacrificed along the way by her enemies who are attempting to track her down. So yeah, she kinda also gets a lot of people killed, but you know, it's not her fault. Jo's powers allow her to control all men who gaze upon her, with them being irresistibly attracted to her no matter who they are and no matter if she wants to influence them or not. Unless of course they are able to protect themselves against her influence with extremely powerful magic, which we only see from a couple characters really in the series. In other words, her power is pretty freaking strong. The only downside here, which is kind of the crux of it all, is that she can't fully control her powers. That is, she can't turn them off when she wants to, which ends up causing a lot of problems for Jo along the way, but I won't spoil any of that. Anyways, if you haven't read Fatale, it's now, I think, it's gonna be 10 years old soon, so go and read it, hurry up! Came out I think in 2012. That's when it started. Number 6. King Mob. King Mob is the leader of the Invisibles. He was once a horror writer who wrote under the pen name Kit Morrison. As the series The Invisibles is created by Grant Morrison, Mob is believed to be sort of a fictional stand-in for Morrison himself. King Mob's legal name was Gideon Starozowski, and he struggles with his alter persona, especially troubled by how violent he, as King Mob, can be. King Mob is not only a leader who wields power in that sense, because he's a leader, but also has experience with firearms and weapons, is a skilled martial artist and fighter, is psychic, can time travel, and employs the use of chaos magic. So, lots of cool things that he can do. Also, if you haven't read The Invisibles, it is really trippy. Go read it. If you like The Matrix, you'll probably like The Invisibles. If you like The Matrix and if you like Doom Patrol, which of course is also Grant Morrison. Not The Matrix, Doom Patrol. Number 5. Twig. Who is Twig? Only the cutest adventuring hero that you will ever meet. He is so endearing, it makes me want to cry. Twig hails from his own self-titled series and begins issue number 1 by starting off on a journey. He has taken up the position that once belonged to his father as the new placeling. What is a placeling exactly? In this magical land, it is a crucial hero who actively saves the world on basically a daily basis, going out and undertaking massive and arduous quests. Twig never really wanted to be a placeling, he wanted to be a chef, but as a result of what suddenly happened to his father, he happens to be really the only one suitable and qualified to take up this position. Twig is just such a sweet character, like kind of a lovable goof, who does his best to live up to the responsibilities passed down to him. Also, the art in this book and the writing will not only make you fall in love with him, but also his best buddy, who resembles a banana slug, Splat, and honestly, the whole world, which kind of has like a Dark Crystal sort of feel to it. Twig is from Image Comics and made his first appearance in issue number 1 of his own series in May of 2022. Number 4. Rogue Sun. Rogue Sun is one of the newer heroes that we've gotten in the Massive-verse, so yes, there are Radiance and Radiant Black, but they aren't the only heroes in Kyle Higgins' Massive-verse. In the one-shot Supermassive from February 2022, we began to crack the world wide open and were introduced to 2 completely new heroes who existed in the same sort of universe, but not really in the same series, if that makes sense, as Radiant Black. One of them was Rogue Sun. Rogue Sun is actually a legacy hero, and after the death of the original Rogue Sun, Marcus Bell, his son, Dylan Siegel, is called upon to take his father's place. One major problem: Dylan isn't even sure he wants any of this, and he has a more than shaky relationship with his dad, even now knowing and understanding that all this time he was a superhero and hence he may have had some somewhat valid reasons for his absence. And what's more, the powers that he inherits also seem to come with quite a bit of a catch in that regard. He kind of has to live with his dad's ghost in his head. Number 3. Inferno Girl Red. Inferno Girl Red! This is a hero I've been waiting to see come out in the comics for some time, ever since I first saw her appear. Well, Inferno Girl Red has only just had her solo series start to come out, which is limited, with 3 issues existing in book 1 of her series, which I believe implies there will be multiple books to this series. Inferno Girl Red herself first appeared in the Supermassive massive one-shot in February 2022, just like Rogue Sun. However, we wouldn't get her in her solo series, where we'd get to learn even more about Cassia Costa, the girl behind Inferno Girl Red, until January of 2023, with issue number 1 also coming from Image, where of course all the Massiverse is published and exists. In solicitation for the first issue, Cassia earns her place on this list as one of our newest ever superheroes from Indie Comics. She is literally described as, and I quote, the newest Image Comics superhero. In the first issue, we learn of how Cassia Costa was mysteriously chosen to become the new Inferno Girl Red after her world was turned upside down in an instant. It feels like we're taking the category of magical girl to a whole nother level and also mixing in some like fabulous future sci-fi stuff with it, which I love because I love both of those categories. Number 2, The Chosen One. Vanish is just such a cool concept for a comic, and the main character is no exception to the amount of awesome involved here. If you love magical stories, this takes that idea and kind of just like turns it on its head. It answers the question of what happens to young heroes after the evil threat has been vanquished. But it takes a darker turn than most typical happy endings. In Vanish, we follow Oliver Harrison, who is that once young hero, the chosen one grown up. In a world now seemingly devoid of magic, he is haunted by the nightmares from his past and plagued by his own inner demons that he desperately tries at all costs to escape, all while seemingly living an otherwise mundane life. However, Oliver isn't just a washed up former hero. He actually still has held on to a good amount of magic and skills from his past, and must use them to take action once more when a potential new threat appears on the horizon after more than about 20 years apiece, I'd say. Oliver's story is like what would happen to Harry in his adult years if he really didn't want to let go of his past glory and then learn that the Justice League was actually all made up of former Death Eaters. Number 1, Phaedra Essex. Detective Phaedra Essex is the main character of the series Black Cloak. She definitely has an extremely interesting backstory beyond even just her present day story as a detective working in the last known city in all of the world, the city of Kyros. The land Phaedra and her story inhabits is kinda like a cyberpunk world meets a fantasy land where magic still exists but is mostly seemingly coveted by the royals of this land, the privileged few. Phaedra herself used to be a royal, or is a royal, but you know, one who has been exiled, so no longer acknowledging that status. The story only has one issue so far, so really she's quite new when it comes to like her appearance and what's going on with her. So we don't know that much about her just yet, but what we do know is that she is determined and unafraid of putting herself in dangerous situations, that is for sure. Phaedra made her first appearance in Image Comics in Black Cloak issue number 1 in January 2023. Number 10, Wind. Wind is the name of the main character from the self-titled series, also of course named Wind. It comes from Boom Studios and was written by James Tynion IV with art by Michael Dalianos. Wind is a teenage hero who has always hidden the truth of his elven and magical heritage as a weird blood. His heritage grants him great power he's been hiding from his whole life in an attempt to fit in, being made to believe that magic is dangerous and basically turns people into monsters, or in some other way corrupts them. When he becomes too old to hide his pointed ears and who he is any longer, he is forced to either try and change or embrace who he really is. And in order to protect his friends against those who would hunt both him and them down, Wind ultimately embraces his magical side, unleashing powerful abilities. Wind has wings, can fly, and can communicate with forest-like spirits or sprites. He also has, like many other teen heroes, the power of friendship, which usually means he ends up making friends with powerful allies. I would say if you love the world of Avatar, you might also end up falling in love with both the character Wind and his series. It reminds me of Avatar, at least, in like the best way. Number 9, Lord Fanny. Lord Fanny is Hilda Morales, who was born as a boy but raised as a girl. She's a transsexual woman and one of the first trans heroes in comics. Lord Fanny was raised as a girl by her grandmother because only women in their culture could become witches, and her grandmother was a powerful witch who wanted to pass on her knowledge and power to Fanny. Although Fanny herself did choose to be a girl, if that makes sense. Lord Fanny is a member of the Invisibles team and was created by writer Grant Morrison and artist Steve Yoel. The Invisibles was a comic series that existed as part of DC's DC's Vertigo imprint back when it was around. I miss Vertigo so much. The series began in 1994, and in issue 13 we'd learn more about Lord Fanny's origins and her very tragic backstory. Lord Fanny's such a cool character. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn about even more cool, lesser known indie heroes, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Quantum and Woody. You may have heard of Valiant's character Bloodshot, who recently got his own solo film, but what about all of their other superheroes? Quantum and Woody is a series and superhero duo from Valiant Comics. It was inspired by the superhero team-up series Power Man and Iron Fist, but is a lot more bizarre. The series itself was written by Christopher Priest, with art actually by the artist who did Power Man and Iron Fist. Pretty cool. Quantum and Woody are adoptive brothers who, after years of being estranged, are brought back together when their father mysteriously dies. While trying to figure out what really happened to him, they stumble upon superpowers. The catch? They must touch their power bands at least once every 24 hours to not only keep their powers, but also keep from losing their lives as well, as they would then no longer exist if they didn't touch their band. Quantum's powers are more defense-based, while Woody's are more offensive. Oh, and they also kind of have an animal sidekick, Vincent Van Gogh, who is even more bizarre than he already sounds. Just trust me. I don't want to spoil anything, but Vincent Van Gogh. What a goat. Number 7. Vampirella, but you can call her Vampy. Vampirella isn't a conventional hero by any means, but she definitely tries to do what's best by folks while still being a vampire from outer space, and at the same time with ties to Lilith and Hell. Overall, she's both complicated and also kinda super simple, and it's that weird blend of those two very different elements that I love about her. Vampy, being an intergalactic vampire, is super strong, fast, can fly because she actually has wings, and also has been shown to have access to advanced technology at times due to her ties to the planet Draculon. Vampirella is currently attached to Dynamite Comics, but was originally a property of Warren Publishing. Number 6. Savage Dragon. Savage Dragon is a popular hero as far as the lesser known or indie heroes go, so if you haven't heard of him before, you might want to check him out. Initially, his origins were a mystery. All we knew was that he was a humanoid, green-skinned, dragon-like character who decided to fight as a police officer and hero, fighting against the criminal and mutant super freaks of Chicago. That's also in part because Savage Dragon initially had really bad amnesia in the comics, so he didn't actually even remember his own origin story at the time. Savage Dragon hails from Image Comics and was originally introduced as simply Dragon before being known under the mantle of Savage Dragon. His powers include super strength and super healing. Number 5. Laura Wilson / Persephone. Laura Wilson is the main character of the Wicked and the Divine series from Image Comics. The series was created by writer Kieran Gillen and artist Jamie McKelvey. In this story, gods come to life cyclically, being kinda reincarnated. This is known as the recurrence. Laura herself is obsessed with the gods and the pantheon, who are all of course re-emerging at the time. She wants nothing more than to be a god herself. At least that is what she thinks she wants, until her wishes kind of come true. She is revealed to be Persephone, who is believed to be the final god to return during the recurrence. As Persephone, she can summon plants and vines and control them. She also seems to have some kind of control or influence over the underworld. Laura can also create fireballs and reveal to others past events, summoning visions of the past even if she was not present for those events. Number 4. Sludge. Sludge is a hero or anti-hero who comes to us initially from Malibu Comics and was created by writer Steve Gerber and artist Aaron Lopresti. Sludge was once Frank Hogue, a dirty NYPD police officer who accepted bribes in exchange for favors when it came to drug dealings. He was ordered by the crime boss he worked for, John Paul Marcello, to kill another likely dirtier cop. When Frank refused Marcello's request, Marcello had him killed instead. After being shot, a grenade went off, knocking him into a bucket of chemical waste. Who put that chemical waste there? The waste would merge with him after he was dumped into the sewers, turning him into the super heroic monstrosity Sludge. Sludge possesses a healing factor and super strength. He could also kill or mutate his opponents with just a touch. Kinda turns them into sludge. It's pretty dark, really. Number 3. Radiant Yellow. We don't know that much about the newest Radiants, but we do know that they seem interested in protecting innocent people from whatever craziness is currently going on. Okay, hard to keep talking about all of this Radiant Black series without spoiling anything, but once again, I'm gonna try my best. Radiant Yellow appears to be an older gentleman, and as far as I know, we don't really know his name yet. What we do know is that each Radiant seems to have their own power set. At least that's what we're being led to believe by the story and the imagery used. confused. It hasn't exactly all been laid out yet, which is honestly kind of what makes this series so much fun. There's so much we don't know. The mystery of it all. Radiant Yellow, however, seems to have powers based in perhaps light manipulation. To me, that's what it looks like the force blasts that they emit are based in, and it also looks to me like they can perhaps manipulate light to create illusions. That's just based on the imagery that's surrounding them in the comics. Like the other Radiants, Yellow isn't too experienced and doesn't seem to understand the full extent of their powers just yet. Radiant Yellow comes to us from the Radiant Black series, which belongs to Image Comics and is written by Kyle Higgins, who, yes, was also the initial writer of the Power Rangers series, and it was also created by artist Marcelo Costa. Number 2. Exo-Manowar. Valiant Comics actually has a whole stable and universe filled with supers, including this one here, Exo-Manowar. Exo-Manowar is actually the name of the sentient armor that is tied to our hero in this series, Auric of Dacia, a Visigoth from the 5th century AD. Auric would end up being abducted by aliens and enslaved for years before he managed to escape. Auric learned of where his captive's armory was kept and basically ended up getting there and then getting the Exo-Manowar suit. He then bonded with the suit and used that advanced tech to escape his captors. However, due to interstellar travel, by the time he arrived back on Earth, it was now the 20th century, basically modern day. Eric would have to adjust to this very different world, and along the way would meet other superheroes from the Valiant universe. That's right, there's not just 2 more, there's a whole bunch of them. Exo-Manowar is a character created by writers Jim Shooter, Steve Englehart, and as well as artists Bob Layton and Barry Windsor-Smith. Number 1. Black Hammer. Black Hammer is Joe Weber, the title character of the Black Hammer series, written by Jeff Lemire with artwork by the amazing Dean Ormston. The Black Hammer series was made to be completely different from other more traditional superhero comics, but if I did have to compare Black Hammer to anyone from that more conventional world, I would liken him to Thor myself. Joe Weber inherited the hammer and powers of the former Black Hammer when he died, being transported to the realm of New World as soon as he himself had picked up the fallen hammer. There he learned that he was meant to become the new Black Hammer, replacing the fallen one as Starlock's new and most powerful warrior in the fight against Starlock's evil twin, the Anti-God. While being the title character, Black Hammer isn't actually the main character of this series. As we learn near the end of issue number 1, Black Hammer sacrificed himself to save the world from the Anti-God and keep his fellow superheroes and friends alive. But what really happened to him, and just how and why are his teammates now seemingly trapped in the timeless and kinda eerie town of Rockwood? Well, to find out, you'll have to read on, true believers. But honestly, you should just go read Black Hammer because it's pretty great. Everyone go read all the Black Hammer things. It's like a whole universe now. Number 10. Aaron Slaughter. Aaron Slaughter is not quite as new as some of the others on this list, but I really wanted to shout him out and the series he's from, so I'm extending my definition of new for just that purpose. By about a year. He is from a series that I can't quite say the name of here on the YouTubes, so instead we are going to use an acronym. Is that cool with you? It's cool with me. We're going to use the acronym of SIKTC. What can I say? It is a title that has the word killing in it, so there's a hint if you're looking to look it up. And it's about basically monster hunters and the people that they help as they travel around trying to eliminate vicious creatures who prey on innocents. Erica Slaughter is the first monster hunter we are introduced to through the series, and Aaron Slaughter is basically kind of like her adoptive brother. He not only appears in SIKTC, making his first appearance in issue number 3, I believe, of that series, but also now appears in the spin-off title House of Slaughter. SIKTC and Aaron Slaughter are both properties coming from Boom Studios. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us that you love us by clicking that like button? Why not show indie comics that you love them? Because let's be honest, they deserve it. They deserve a thumbs up. Give it to them. Number 9. Gunslinger Spawn. Gunslinger Spawn is a hero who you may think of as old now, considering he first made a very brief first appearance on a cover back in 2002. But this Gunslinger that we're talking about here is not the same Gunslinger Spawn as the one that first appeared back in 2002, and later got his origin story shared in 2008. This Gunslinger Spawn is not old Job, but instead Jovi, who is much younger gunslinger and also is believed to be Mexican in regards to his heritage. His initial appearance was a bit of a mystery, with people simply wondering how Gunslinger Spawn had made his way to the future, but in issue number 3 of the Gunslinger Spawn series, we learned that this Gunslinger Spawn was definitely not who we expected when he left his spawn form, revealing a completely different face from the one we'd expected when we believed he was Old Job. While there is still much for us to learn about Jovi in regards to his past and his origin, it is implied that Old Job's Hellspawn powers were somehow passed on to him. This version of Gunslinger Spawn first appeared back in Spawn issue 308 in July of 2020. Later in Spawn Universe issue number 1, we would see him featured in a short story at the end of the comic where he had no discernible face, which is what made people assume that he was the original Gunslinger Spawn we were first introduced to back in the early 2000s. Number 8. Ellipses Howell. Ellipses Ellie Howell is one of the main characters from Crossover. Crossover is an ongoing Image Comics series that's currently on hiatus that jumps into the real world, telling the story of a literal crossover that happens between the comic book world and everyday Earth. As heroes and villains jump into the real world, chaos ensues, and it's up to the main characters to find a way out of this mess and back home. Ellipses Howell is one of these main characters. She herself is actually a fictional character, but a seemingly everyday person, despite being fictional. She's also one of the last few people in her story who is considered a true believer when it comes to the world of fiction and superheroes. She dresses up as one and has recently been seen in the comics wielding a sword that allows her to create portals into other worlds. I don't know about you, but I'd say that both her intentions and her ability to wield a badass portal creating sword makes her pretty heroic. Also, Ellie has a really cool name that definitely implies she is the one who has the symbolic thematic power to deal with this problem best. She was named Ellipses because her mom believed ellipses represent the idea of the impossible and the great unknown, and that her daughter would be capable of anything. Ellipses makes her first appearance in Crossover issue number 1, which was released through Image in November of 2020. Number 7. Radiant Black. Radiant Black is now a couple different people, but originally it was Nathan Burnett, who made his first appearance in Radiant Black issue number 1 and adopted the persona of Radiant Black, eventually brainstorming up his superhero name afterwards with his best friend Marshall. Radiant Black is basically like Power Rangers but for adults, and a series that involves a lot more mystery than the Power Rangers premise, which is pretty front-loading when it comes to the lore behind the Power Rangers in terms of their origin, where their powers come from, and why they were entrusted with these powers in the first place. In Radiant Black, many of these questions go unanswered to start, with us being given little hints along the way as to what is really going on with these Radiants and their hosts. Honestly, it's a brilliant series, and one that has not only given us a super cool new hero in Radiant Black, but has also given us a super cool new cast of heroes with the Radiants, and beyond, a super cool new universe to explore with the Massiverse. Radiant Black issue number 1 was released via Image in February of 2021. Number 6. Berserker. The character that we initially only know as B is the protagonist of the series Berserker from Boom Studios. He is an ancient warrior, half god, half mortal, who is fighting to learn the truth of his origins and also to learn how to finally put an end to his life, as he is constantly driven towards bloodshed. He ends up accepting a mission to fight for the United States, participating in crazy, perilous, and deadly battles in exchange for this information on his own life. This series was written by Matt Kindt in collaboration with Keanu Reeves, which was where the hype came from for it, but it seems to have been a series that really delivered on this hype because a lot of people love it. While I have yet to read it myself, I have talked to those who have, and there are quite a few out there who just really love this series. It's definitely one that I need to read. The first issue of Berserker was released in March of 2021 and featured the mysterious bloodthirsty bee, who we'd later come to know as Berserker, and it's a property from Boom Studios. Number 5. Witchblade. Witchblade is a hero who comes from Top Cow Productions. Mainly we've known Witchblade as Sarah Pizzini, but the Witchblade has belonged to many other powerful women throughout the years. The Witchblade is an ancient mystical artifact that typically binds itself to a host who can then wield and use its powers at will. It can be more or less powerful depending on the host, but in this case, since Sarah is one of the most well-known hosts of the Witchblade, we're gonna basically base the ranking on her abilities. The Witchblade can be used to summon mystical armor, which can cover the entirety of its host's body, though typically most are not skilled enough to actually summon that much armor, and instead are usually only covered in little pieces of armor as a result. Hence why you see that Witchblade art and she's like, not really covered in much. This armor grants the rare invulnerability, but even if its host is harmed, it also grants the power to heal. Aside from creating armor, the Witchblade can also be used to create weapons on the fly. It also increases its host's strength and endurance. Sarah herself was also a trained NYPD detective prior to becoming the host for the Witchblade, so she also brings her skills as an officer and detective to the table. Number 4. Luther Strode. Luther Strode is the main character in the Strange Talent of Luther Strode series, a series that hails from Image Comics. Luther ends up acquiring powers that enhance his strength, durability, speed, and combat skills after receiving a mail order exercise program known as the Hercules Method. Luther's powers, however, only create more harm than good in his life and lead to a lot of death, much of it happening as a result of his own involvement. Try as he might to try and do good with it. While not a conventional hero, Luther definitely fits the bill of an anti-hero, or more accurately tragic hero archetype, with everything going awry no matter his intent. He's also someone I would personally love to see take on the hero who made our number 2 spot. Number 3. Radiant Black. Radiant Black is Nathan Burnett, or was Nathan Burnett. Nathan to start, anyways. Going to try not to spoil this series because it's one that I think we should all be reading, so I'm just gonna leave it at Nathan for now. Radiant Black is the first hero we meet in this series. In issue number 1, Nathan ends up getting the powers of the Black Radiant, which basically means he has the powers of a black hole. Radiant Black can manipulate gravity and also becomes super dense with this power set. The downside for this hero is being new means that he's pretty inexperienced in the comics thus far. However, gravity manipulation as a power set is insane, which is how he ranks so high up on this list despite his inexperience. Radiant Black hails from Image Comics, and like I said, if you have not checked out this series and gotten to know the Radiants yet, well, you definitely need to change that, and you need to do so. It's like Power Rangers, but possibly cooler, and I say that having much respect and much love for Power Rangers. So that's not a snub at all, it's just like, it's really good. Number 2. Bulletproof. You know Invincible, but do you know Bulletproof? Fans of the comic series likely do, but if you just became an Invincible fan via the animated series, then this isn't a character that you'd be familiar with just yet. After all, at this point we've only had 1 season so far, so it's very likely Bulletproof will appear in the series, just not until a bit later on. Bulletproof is Xandel Rudolph. He got his powers as a result of his brother using him as basically a science experiment, as his brother Tyrone was actually obsessed with superpowers. Xandel would end up getting powers as a result of this mad science, while his brother would end up dead. Bulletproof also goes on to take up the Invincible mantle at one point, filling in for Mark when he is off-world. Xandel's powers are based on energy absorption, which I think is one of the strongest power sets to have personally. Bulletproof, like other heroes in the Invincible universe, comes to us from Skybound, which is an imprint of Image Comics. Number 1. The Darkness. The Darkness is an ancient elemental force that takes up residence in a host, granting them special powers. One of the most famous hosts that we have come to know as the Darkness is Jackie Estacado. The powers that Jackie wields are similar to what you'd expect from some kind of demonic force. They're also honestly comparable to Venom's power set from Marvel Comics, at least I see a lot of similarities there. The Darkness gives you access to a sort of mystical armor which can be summoned at will. It also grants the user a healing factor, shapeshift abilities, and through them also the ability to fly via wings that you can create. Jackie as the Darkness can also create dark tendrils, which he can also turn into weapons, and he can also summon entities known as Darklings. While more of an anti-hero due to his methods, Jackie Estacado is still a hero in the sense that he generally fights on the side of good. The Darkness hails from Top Cow Productions. And if you do know the Witchblade, you probably know the Darkness, or vice versa.